food consumption over the last 2 decades. But we expected that to go to 18%, and as you can see, the bar there is actually increasing in size itself, not only in the share that we will be contributing to. And this is even, declining magnitude, even growing in decline in sort of like a declining trend in additional agricultural consumption. What this means is if production doesn't catch up in sub-Saharan Africa, then import dependency will increase. And that is what it is right now, and I'll be discussing in the next few slides. Within these countries, also, as you can see, the countries that are driving the seed are also changing. In the last 20 years, it was mainly China, the boom in China that was actually leading to growth in agricultural consumption. But then going forward, I think India and Sub-Saharan Africa are the key ones where growth would be located. The second message I would like to share is on the sector's impact on greenhouse gas emissions. There's a consensus that, and based on the data that we have, that the sector's greenhouse emission intensity, that's emission per output, is expected to decline because production is predominantly now being driven by productivity gains rather than expansion in cultivated area or livestock herds. The chart here illustrates, and I'll try to explain it. The horizontal axis is growth, annual change in production. The vertical axis is annual change in greenhouse gas emissions. The 45-degree dotted line is instances where agricultural production growth equals greenhouse gas emission growth. So there's no change in intensity, right? Below that line, there's an improvement. We're producing more for every emissions for every GHG we emit. So as you can see, in all the regions, the intensity is declining. And it's more so in Sub-Saharan Africa. The size of the bubble is just the share of emissions from each, direct agricultural emissions from each region. And as you can see, Sub-Saharan Africa is quite big, 16% of total emissions. But also one thing that we see is Sub-Saharan Africa production is growing fast, as you can see. And at the same time, GHG emissions are also growing, but not as fast as production. What this means is that if you're a government or an international donor and you care about feeding the world more sustainably, where are you going to produce your next food? It's in Africa, because that's your best bet, that's bang for the buck. That's where you get the most benefit. Because emission is the production is emission intensive, productivity is still low, so there's a lot of opportunities to increase production over there. My next message is on food security and nutrition theme. The Sustainable Development Goal of eliminating hunger by 2030 is doomed to fail. I don't think without any further drastic measures we cannot achieve that in 6 years. This chart is on average calorie intake for the world and for Sub-Saharan Africa between now and the next 10 years. And as you can see, the growth in additional intake is really limited, which is too small to achieve zero hunger. Even in Sub-Saharan Africa, as you can see, average calorie intake will still be below 2,000 calories, and this is intake less wastage. So we've done some developments in our model, and I'll talk about that later. Millions of households are also lacking income to significantly transition to more nutrient intensive or more protein-rich diets. For example, animal products, vegetables, fish and seafood, fruits, And that means they are continuing to rely on staples. And as you can see, it's unique in sub-Saharan Africa, right? I mean, we're getting 70% of our calories from staples compared to a world average of 50%. The share of the share of animal products in our diet is only 6.5% compared to almost 20% in the rest of the world. So, but it's not also just income, you know, it's, you know, diets are influenced by habits, you know, cultural preferences and stuff like that. And it requires a lot of public awareness in addition to increasing incomes to change that. But I think for now, we have to, the challenge is to make sure that everyone has something to eat. My next slide is on food loss and waste. It pertains to the role of food loss and waste in agri-food system challenges. For the first time this year, we have specified nutrition projections at the per capita level, right? So by estimating food loss and waste and taking away that from food consumption. So this allowed us to do a more direct assessment of the expected nutritional situations in countries, highlighting that food loss and waste was an important challenge, not only constraining the environment because a lot of wastage of resources, but also it also reduces food availability. And as you may be aware, Sustainable Development Goal 12 of the UN 2030 agenda has a target to have food waste by 2030 and also reduce food loss and waste along the supply chain. We have seen a growing number of countries, mostly in the developed world, setting national targets in this regard and implementing policies aimed at achieving these targets. So what we have explored this year is what happens if you know, we cut food loss and waste by half. What are the implications for food security and what are the implications for greenhouse gas emissions? And as you can see in the chart, the blue bars are for like calories. There's more calories consumed, particularly for low-income countries where a lot of sub-Saharan Africans are. And also, like, there's a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of 4%. So we also ran this through a undernutrition model that tells you the number of people that are undernourished or facing hunger in each region. So we ran through this and we found that by reducing food loss and waste, 153 million people, or 26% of people facing hunger, their lives could be improved. In Africa, it was about 70 million, or 31% reduction in the number of people facing hunger. My final message is about trade. Every year, approximately 20% of the calories cross borders before they're consumed. And that's why well-functioning markets, agricultural commodity market, are critical for food security and nutrition, ensuring availability. No, back. Okay. Okay, so yeah. So trade is not only important for food security and nutrition, but it's also ensuring livelihoods, because rural farmers can participate in global value chains, uplifting their livelihoods. And as mentioned earlier, the location of global production and consumption has changed last 20 years, has shifted. And this has created deficits and surpluses in different places, leading to changes in international trade patterns. 20 years ago, as you can see, the blue bar on the left, the blue bars on the left, 20 years ago, North America was the region that was exporting, leading exporter of agricultural commodities. Now, it's Latin America that's holding the mantle. 20 years ago, it was Middle East and North Africa that were importing a lot of food because of the economic boom in Asia. Now they are the ones who are massively importing agricultural commodities. As you can see, sub-Saharan Africa there, it's a net importer of agricultural commodities, and it's deepening. And as I mentioned before, consumption is growing because of populations, because a lot of people are moving to towns and urban areas, because incomes are growing in some places, but production is not catching up, and that leads to deepening of net exports. Is there a role for AFCAFTA? Possibly, but for us, our view is that AFCAFTA right now is a political win for the region. It's the economic benefits or the economic win for the continent needs to be unlocked. As we've mentioned, we've discussed in these rooms in the last couple of days, transportation links are weak, infrastructure problems are there, there are border inefficiencies, non-tariff barriers, trust have to be built. People, like countries, are actually trading with their former colonial, colonial countries, and so there's a lot of things that need to be done to achieve potential market integration with AFCAFTA. And for this reason, we have not considered AFCAFTA tariff reductions in our outlook, but we assumed there would be some improvements in market efficiency until we are sure that there's some movement around there. But also you have to AFCAFTA doesn't solve all problems. You have to understand this from different perspectives. AFCAFTA can create a larger, more integrated market which will attract investment and foster economic growth. That may improve the livelihood of African consumers, and when that happens, they will lead to higher demand for agricultural commodities. And if there are no complementary efforts to improve productivity and innovation in the region, then we will continue to depend more on the international market, and the region will be more vulnerable to global shocks. And this is where there's an enormous opportunity. This is where there's an enormous opportunity. I showed this graph in the last conference, and I'm going to keep showing as long as you keep inviting me. Look at the yellow rectangles there, the yellow, right? That is where sub-Saharan Africa productivity is in the global ranges, at the bottom, right? In most of them, right? It is consistently lower because we're not optimally utilizing our land, and we are deepening our dependence on food inputs when our consumption is growing. Livestock productivity is also the same. So why is this? Because these large yield gaps are often due to fertilizer application rates and also inefficient fertilizer application rates in the region compared to the more productive regions. Is intensification possible? Yes, it is, because estimates are potential yields, right, given rainfall and other inputs taken into account, are 2 to 6 times the current yields, which means we have a lot more to gain by intensifying. And as I mentioned before, you also get benefits because you are producing the next output, the next output at much lesser intensity in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. So this year I enlisted the help of a couple experts, and I asked them about how can we intensify African agriculture? I mean, some of the recommendations, some of the things that they mentioned is pretty basic, and we've had of this multiple times. But I think it's worth saying that again and again, so that we get it right. The first one is on infrastructure for growth and development of viable value chains, and we've discussed about the PPPC doing that in the last session. So you have to understand this. Agriculture is inherently a risky venture, and that requires intervention here and there. Demand side to ensure food security and nutrition, and also on the supply side for rural livelihoods. But the best incentive for higher productivity and agricultural development is the market, right? You build a road to rural areas, farmers and value chain actors get access to the market. They can transport their products there. You increase rural broadband coverage, farmers and actors have real-life digital information on prices, on other aspects of the market to make decisions, right? You expand electricity coverage to rural areas, farmers and actors can invest in technologies such as cold storage to reduce food loss and waste. But these are not ag-specific interventions. These are just economy-wide things, and the ag sector, like the other sectors of the economy, benefit from that. Secondly, I think we cannot overemphasize the role of synthetic fertilizers. Right? Currently, application rates are low, 20 kilograms per hectare, way below the global average of 140, 150 per hectare. Right? We understand there are like poor soils in our region, and I'm not saying this is a blanket call for like, you know, application of fertilizer, but it's more of a holistic approach, right? It involves using fertilizers as part of our integrated soil fertility management, you know, combining with soil amendments, organic matter, lime, providing quality extension services, you know, and also developing the supply chains, you know, the functioning input and output markets, so that farmers can have access to that, to fertilize at affordable rates. And again, bear in mind, if you want to produce an extra, you know, maize from an extra hectare of land, you have to apply 140 kilograms of fertilizer in one of these more developed economies. You don't need that amount of fertilizer to increase production in Africa. You need much less than that, right? So, bang for the buck. Okay, thirdly, there is an understanding that, and I have had discussions in this room with some of this, there's understanding that many African farmers keep livestock as a store of capital for manure production, for animal traction, instead of maximizing production of animal products, right? And so there's opportunity to change this mindset and encourage business approach to African agriculture. Some of the discussion that I have with Erdele was, you know, the Sahel, for example, you know, livestock herders' mobility have been restricted due to many factors, right? Why don't we work with them to have ranches there, right? And sort of supply feed from more productive areas, right? Why don't we create that feed market, ranches and feed market somewhere, right? So these areas, for example, like, you know, desert borders and highlands where rainfall and temperatures limit crop yields, they're ideal for ruminant production, and there's opportunity for ranching in those areas. The final point is a bit contentious, that the ones that they came up with, and it was a bit challenging for us because we published this with the OECD and they don't like tariffs and stuff like that. But one of the things that they said was level the playing field to support domestic producers, right? And I can attest to that because I worked in some of these developed countries. African farmers are competing with European, American, and Asian farmers that have developed and continue to develop their agriculture value chains behind secure tariff walls, right? The amount of subsidies that industrialized countries give to their farmers is mind-boggling. And the region needs to, I think, level the playing field with the rest of the world. This is, you know, Tracy presented something in Kenya, for example, in one of her presentations yesterday. This should be temporary, not a permanent solution, right? Until those industries can compete on the world stage. I would like to end with a... Okay, this is giving me... I would like to end with a call for collaboration. There is a lot of work to do going forward. And as we delve to transform agri-food systems in the continent, and we need to strengthen the research and analytical capacity of local institutions, as we have been talking about, so that they can provide relevant, high-quality evidence. At ANAPRI, I think the ingredients to be a premier source of evidence based analysis to governments are there. To government, the private sector, the development agencies. You guys have extensive country and regional networks with local expertise. You guys have access to competent pool of talents. But the value proposition, especially to the private sector and to government, must be clear, right? Right now, it's working well with international donors, but it's not working well in that aspect. At FAO, we're ready to collaborate and support with the work of ANAPRI, especially the Modeling Service Center, to evaluate alternative policies and approaches to address current and emerging agri-food systems. There are a lot of things that are happening. We can no longer rely on the old systems or current systems to deliver zero hunger sustainably. Consumption patterns are changing as more people move into urban centers and incomes rise. Conflicts and crises and natural disasters are increasing in number and intensity, and reducing availability and undermining social production systems. So it's imperative that we continuously adapt and develop our technical and analytical capabilities. And I look forward to your discussions on this. I've already started discussions with staff at the Modeling Service Center. We are ready to help. We've developed these tools over 20 years, and you can actually calibrate to any data that you have. You don't have to start from the scratch. You can make the changes, and we're ready to deploy that. Thank you. It was a pleasure presenting this to you. I appreciate, and I'm looking forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. And some of the, I think, as you've all heard, the key messages for this outlook, basically giving us the medium-term agricultural outlook, looking at 2024 to 2033. Thank you very much. And with these key messages and the call for collaboration, I think let's just dive into kind of trying to engage more. How can we do these collaborations? How can we see some of these challenges? How can we be able to manage them in our own different ways? So we are going to call on somebody just from the government representative to join the panel up here. So do we have Mr. David Ombalo Otieno from the Ministry of Agriculture in Kenya in the room? Please come up here and join the panel. We'll also invite Ms. Gamuchiarai Kapembeza from the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries and Rural Development, I think from Zimbabwe. Please join us here. They'll be representing the government. I also want to invite the private sector to come and join us here. And from the private sector, we are going to have Mr. Yotam Mkandawire. He's from the Grain Traders Association of Zambia. Thank you very much. And of course, we need our policy think tanks to be represented here. So I'm going to call on Dr. Tracy Davis from BFAB. Please come and join us here. Francis Hale, Dr. Francis Hale from FanPan. Please join us here. Yes, then Dr. Nega Hubene from AGRA. Please come up here and join the panel. Thank you very much, panelists, for joining me here to talk more about this. And I'm going to go straight to the government representative. We're going to start with Mr. David Ombalo Otieno. And the same question will apply also to the representative from Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries from Zimbabwe. And just give us and how these, using these examples that we've seen here, and in your various countries in the continent, how you're pushing for food self-sufficiency. We're also borrowing from yesterday's presentation, of course, which fits very well into today's. These self-sufficiency goals may contradict the effort of deepening regional economic integration. Use your own country's examples to be able to see how this free trade can resolve some of these contradictions. So we're going to start with, I think, Mr. David Ombalo.
Thank you very much. Maybe before I answer the question, I wanted to make an observation on the presentation, particularly with regard to the factors that influence intensification. And I was keenly looking at that list that the presentation gave. And I think conspicuously absent in that list were two key issues which generally we consider to be very critical to intensification. The genetics that we extract from quality seed really is a parameter that we cannot ignore in my view. And I think we need to have science and studies also, research like this also bring them out, that if you do not have the inherent potential in quality seed, which you may want to extract by providing the nutrients through fertilizer and good soils, then you cannot achieve much. It is the genetics that really provide the potential of what can be achievable, even with good quality seed. So I think that is a key parameter that we should not overlook. And seed then becomes very central to intensification. In sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly in countries like mine, in Kenya, I think the issue of mechanizing processes is also very, very critical. That labor-saving technologies, the efficiencies and the drudgery, the efficiencies it brings in the production system and the drudgery that it removes, particularly make it even attractive for youth and the upcoming generation to get involved in agriculture. So the issue of mechanization and the issue of seed, I think is one thing. When I had the presentation, I felt that I think there are things that must be considered as central to intensification. Now to the question, I think the issue of self-sufficiency vis-a-vis trade is something that must be considered in the context not only of the efficiencies associated with providing food security for a country, but there are more intricate issues that can be measured at the larger economic scale in terms of involvement, in terms of livelihoods, and sometimes governments tend to support even enterprises that essentially are not very profitable and do not have a very big commercial multiplier effect among the producing population, just because they would want to keep the economic wheels, the livelihood supports, and probably even household self-sufficiency going, to the extent that ideally, whereas it is required or it is economically advised that you should concentrate on value chains that you are competitive at, and import those which you think you cannot produce competitively, where you don't have competitive advantage. Most policies would still focus on also producing locally. I think this is the contradiction that we must find a balance in, and I think this sometimes influences the kind of policies that nations adopt, and therefore there is the place for trade, but alongside it you will always find policies that countries advocate for which would want to enhance local production.
Thank you very much for your insights and specifically giving us the Kenyan example. Let's just dive into the same question by Mr. Kapembeza. Okay, So I think he didn't join us on the stage. Maybe let's go into maybe now to the think tank. Mr. Francis Hale, maybe you should try to tell us the steps to address some of the barriers in agricultural trade and agribusiness integration.
I think you are mixing your questions. You want to go again?
You want a different question?
No. I have seen the script.
That's fine. Okay, so maybe you want to look at how can FANPAN facilitate knowledge sharing and capacity building initiatives that empower stakeholders to navigate these barriers and to be able to drive policy reforms that are aligned with these AFCFTA goals.
That's okay. I will try to be as practical as possible so that I don't end
Thank you.
I will try to also find the answer in the scope of what FANAPAN is and what it does. The Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is relatively new, is relatively young. Mm-hmm. If I look at it, it's an infant compared to, for instance, CADIP. Mm. We are a year away from launching the third 10-year plan of CADIP. But if we go to our governments, if we go to our stakeholders on the continent, even in the government sector, in the central authority, you will find people who still don't know CADIP, who still don't understand CADIP, who run programs, and CADIP is the other thing. So I would expect the same to be the situation, if not worse, with the Continental Free Trade Agreement. Given that, as a network, our first role, or any network for that matter, that is focusing on this, would be to look at understanding this creature and doing or coordinating policy research to understand the gray areas. Just like CADIP, it's developed and created at the highest level, and our heads of state and representatives rush to sign, and it stops there. What we now need to understand is what are the gaps, what are the things that an ordinary person who actually does the agriculture, who actually does the trade, needs to understand. What are those gaps that we need to cover? And I am happy I sit amongst a research community. It's one of the stakeholders. Currency for this is evidence. So that's the first thing that we need to cultivate. Generating evidence to plug the holes, to plug the gaps that exist in this creature. The second is to create a constituency that can come with a very big voice and start advocating. If you look at agriculture, we had a farmer from the mountain kingdom or the beautiful mountains, and maybe there might be 3-4 other people who are farmers or people who started off as farmers, but largely those are not the people that we get in conferences such as this, but those are the ones who are doing agriculture and doing trade. We need to build that constituency now for us to hear from them what it means to produce, what it means to trade. There are very wonderful documents that define the Continental Free Trade Agreement, processes and all that, done at a certain level where we then congratulate each other in our offices, but we really don't know what happens. So we have to build a constituency that starts understanding, and we do the policy advocacy, and we do the knowledge management to benefit the people who actually work on the ground. Then the final one is capacity strengthening. We assume we know, but we don't. And we need to embrace our not knowing so that we develop. In our government departments, in our non-state actor groupings, there are a lot of gaps that need to be addressed. I really think that a needs analysis which is honest, which looks at this thing, so that we don't go through a 10-year phase like we did with CADIP, and then come to Malawi and say, hey, it's been 10 years, but we really didn't do much. Then we start introducing mechanisms to try and improve. We would rather do this early. We build capacity. We provide technical assistance to all the stakeholders. I don't want to point the finger at the government entity. The non-state actor is absent in most of these things and are available. on the last stage complaining. Let us also build a capacity within the non-state actors so that there is accountability, and then everyone puts their hands together and we are able to address the barriers. I have not picked a particular barrier, but I'm just looking at, let's do research to plug the gaps. Let's build a constituency to do advocacy. And let's support each other and hold hands in terms of capacity so that when we say we are doing the Continental Free Trade Area or agreement, all the necessary stakeholders understand what it is, know what they are supposed to do, and we do it jointly. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Francis. And I just, without repeating what you've said, I want to go directly to another think tank, Dr. Tracy. So South Africa has been noted as one of the countries that stands to benefit a lot from this regional integration within the AfCFTA agreement. What lessons can other countries draw from South Africa's experience, and so that they are able to position their own agribusiness sector to benefit from this regional trade integration?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I would agree that we stand as South Africa probably to benefit from the agreement, but I wouldn't say we've positioned ourselves as such for regional integration as what we've positioned ourselves for export-led growth. I think if you look back at our policy space in recent years, things like the National Development Plan, there's always been a strong priority on commodities where we are competitive, where we do very well in the export markets, commodities that are high value, labor intensive, generate a lot of foreign revenue for us, and these commodities have been integral to the growth that we've seen in our sector. I think we've always considered competitiveness as integral. So if you can be really competitive in that global market space, then of course you can operate anywhere. You can operate in the region, you can operate in the world market, etc. I think we've been very pro-trade, which has exposed our producers to a lot of competition. It's made them very good at what they do. It's also enabled them to have access to top technology globally. The very best seed technology and so forth, to benefit from global initiatives in that respect. And I think we've created the environment where people can then invest. So we've seen a lot of investment in expansion, investment in improved production practices, etc. And integral to that has been market access. So it's making sure that these products have sufficient market space in many different markets, so that prices are sustainable, so that producers have options. And I think this is a key area where our industry has collaborated very well with government in terms of identifying markets that they want to access for specific products, helping with the research to get that done. And I think that collaboration, the strong organization of things like producer organizations that speak with one voice to government on what's required and what the priorities are, has been integral to that.
Very good. Thank you very much for those insights. And I think they speak very well to what David had already talked about. Identify the competitive commodities. Don't have sweeping policies that are not really focused. I think that's the key point and the takeaway from hearing from Mr. David and from a think tank. And specifically giving an example of South Africa, how it has managed to perform quite well and how we can learn from them. I also want now to take this mantle to another think tank, Dr. Nega. Please, can you speak to this? Over the past decade, AGRA has expanded its focus on markets and trade. What triggered this strategic move? What are some of the interventions that AGRA is implementing to unlock the opportunities and be able to advance the inclusive agricultural transformation agenda? Over to you.
Thank you. So AGRA, since its establishment, has had different programs, especially in its first strategy. It started with seed and the soil health program, and the later markets and policy. But in the first phase, they were kind of disintegrated, very siloed approach. In the second phase, we adopted a country-based programming, where most of our programs are, market-led food system transformation approach. So what we've been doing it basically looking at the market, what the market demands in terms of quality and volume, and then work backwards to on the value chains to address the key bottlenecks, including seed, the extension system, soil fertility issues, post-harvest management and policy, and state capability as well. So we have two levels of intervention. One is at systems level, and the second one is farmer-facing intervention and geographic-based intervention. So doing that, we support the development of a market system, including market system information, the rules of law, grading and standards and quality. But on regional trade, we started intervening in the last 5 years because Africa, as we have been saying the last few days, still imports a lot of food from the rest of the world, while we're not really trading with our closest neighbors. And trade holds immense opportunity for economic growth, job creation, etc. But we face a lot of challenges in trading, including infrastructure and payment systems, differing quality and grading standards, bureaucratic bottlenecks and harassment, at the border crossing points. So AGRA started to tackle some of these challenges, including data and information. As I mentioned yesterday, we are working with COMESA on a regional food balance sheet so that policymakers make informed decisions about key policy issues based on data and evidence, where when they have shortfalls in the country, instead of resorting to export bans, if they understand neighboring countries have stocks, they can import from those countries. Traders also know where is grain available, at what price, so they can move it around. And then we have been working on facilitating mutual recognition agreements of each other's regulatory capacity for quality and standards, and also streamlining trading regimes, etc. And recently we have been supporting the African Continental Free Trade Area developing an agri-food strategy, focusing on key prioritized commodities for phase 1 that can be implemented in facilitating a really managed trade that will be a showcase for expanding their approach in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nega, for the opinions and views from AGRA and what AGRA is doing, basically ensuring that they come up with country-based programs. And I think, again, the government can borrow from the think tanks. Okay, so I would like now to come to the private sector in the spirit of collaboration that has, I think, been one of the themes here. I want to hear from our private sector, what challenges are private sectors facing when exporting or importing food and inputs into our domestic markets, and what are the opportunities and challenges that private sector perceive to be feasible under this AFCFTA, and also if they're private companies as can be game changers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator. And also let me take this opportunity to thank ANAPRI for inviting us to this conference. Yes, indeed, the private sector faces numerous challenges when it comes to exporting and importing of food and agriculture imports into the domestic market. The challenges are mostly complex, most of them. They're quite interconnected and also can vary across regions. So some key issues that I'd raise as follows. When it comes to the infrastructure challenges, I think the poor roads, rail, and port infrastructure, which increases cost and delays in moving goods. Also, the regulatory and policy framework, policy barriers. Different countries within Africa have varied and often inconsistent regulatory frameworks for food and agriculture inputs. Trade and market dynamics. Import duties on agriculture inputs and food products make them expensive and reduce competitiveness. The access to finance, those are the challenges. Limited access to affordable credit or trade finance options affects businesses' ability to manage supply chains. Financial institutions are often hesitant to fund agriculture trade due to perceived risks. Quality and standard compliance. Meeting international or regional food safety and quality standards is a major hurdle for private sector, particularly for small and medium enterprises. The prevalence of fake or substandard seeds, fertilizers, and pesticides undermines trust and productivity in the sector. Logistical issues. Border congestions and inefficient customs services lead to long waiting times and to a larger extent encourages graft and corruption. Reliance on road transport, often in poor conditions, increases costs and risks. Inconsistent shipping services and delays at ports disrupt flow and supply chains. Corruption and informal fees. Corruption at custom checkpoints, illegal roadblocks, and informal levies increase the cost of doing business. I think this AGRA had also raised, they raised it, and it resonates with most of the agri-businesses in Africa. Trade agreements and regional integration. While initiatives like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area aim to reduce trade barriers, practical implementation has been very slow. Differing food safety and agriculture standards across countries hinder trade flows. The climate environment factors, seasonal weather patterns such as heavy rains can disrupt transportation networks, and extreme weather conditions have negatively impacted production and access to food, even worse. Digital and technology gaps. A lack of digital tools for tracking shipments and managing trade documentation increases inefficiencies. Limited access to reliable internet and digital platform hampers smooth trade operations. Addressing these challenges requires a combination of public-private collaboration, policy reforms, investments in infrastructure, and regional cooperation to create enabling environment for trade. The African Free Trade Area opportunities for the private sector. Yes, we agree that if the FCTA is implemented, we should expect expanded access to market. With over 1.2 billion people and combined GDP of approximately 2.5 trillion, FCTA offers vast opportunities for business to access new markets and scale operations. Enhance intra-Africa trade. EFCTA, eliminating tariffs on 90% of goods and reducing non-tariff barriers will boost trade flows, especially in agriculture, manufacturing, and services. Industrialization and economic diversification. Encouraging local processing of raw materials will promote industrial growth and reduce reliance on exports of raw commodities. The expansion of industry will generate employment opportunities, especially for the youth and the women. Boosting regional value chains. EFCTA facilitates the creation of regional value chains, enabling countries to specialize in different parts of the production processes. I think also AGRA had mentioned about this. Attracting foreign investment. A unified market increases African the attractiveness to global investors, fostering infrastructure development, technology transfer, and innovations. Support for SMEs. SMEs can benefit from reduced trade barriers, increased market access, and initiatives to support cross-border trade. Technologies and innovation growth. Opportunities exist to adopt digital trade solutions, e-commerce platforms, and blockchain for seamless transaction and transparency. Agriculture transformation. Increased trade in agricultural goods can improve food security, reduce post-harvest losses, and enable Africa to become a net food exporter. Harmonized standards. This is a serious issue currently. Developing continental standards for goods and services will enhance competitiveness and facilitate easier trade within Africa. Empowerment of youth, women and youth. Women and youth who dominate the informal trade sector stand to benefit from structured trade opportunities, capacity building programs, and financial institutions. The EFCTA implementation challenges. Regulator and policy alignment. Harmonizing trade laws, tax policies, and regulations among 54 out of 55 member states may be complex. Variations in product standards, quality certification, and custom procedures can create bottlenecks. Infrastructure deficit, poor roads, rail network, and port facilities hinder efficiency trade across borders. Limited and reliable energy supplies affect manufacturing and industrial growth. Trade and border management. Persistent challenges like quotas, import and export bans, SPS measures can undermine free trade. Delays, corruption, and bureaucracies at borders slow down flows. Economic disparities. Smaller or less industrialized economies may struggle to compete with larger or more developed nations.
I was going to interject your term.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I was listening to you while I was outside on streaming, and I thought to myself, Zambia has imposed a ban on exports of soybean meal, and Zambia is also a signatory of the AFCFTA, isn't it?
Yeah.
So why do you think that's the case? What's going on in the Zambian case where you have Zambia imposing this ban, but it's also signing up to an agreement where it's saying, let's open our borders? What explains that inconsistency? I'm sure there's a specific set of reasons, and
yeah,
would like to
of course, yeah.
review some of those practical challenges, because you are part of the Traders Association. They are probably the most affected by that policy.
Yeah, currently as we speak, I think there is a quota that has been allowed for the export of the soya cake. So the ban was there, but for a shorter period of time. But that was as a result of the demand on the local consumption. On the local consumers. So the ban was there temporarily just to see how much is being consumed at the local market, and also how much excess do we have as a country. So it was realized that actually we had a lot of cake, and that had also slowed down the production of the crushing of soybeans, because most of the crushers were not able to export the cake, and they had actually slowed down in terms of production. And that triggered a problem, because the soya was not really being crushed. And there was a demand that we should also allow the export of soybeans, because at that time we could not crush much. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you very much. I think, as you can see, the audience is more interested in getting asking more questions from your own presentations. Yeah. So I think I had another round of questions for you, but rather than do that, let's hear from the audience, in case the audience has any questions for each of our panelists. I think this is the time just to delve into them. Any specific question to any panelist here? Everything is okay? Or even to the
Questions,
previous
suggestions?
keynote presenter? Okay, if that's the case, so I'll just go back to my panelists and give them another round of questions, and you can just be brief 1 minute, and then we can save on time. I want to come back to Dr. Tracy. South Africa's export-led growth strategy has been pivotal in expanding the scope and scale of its growth in the agriculture and agribusiness sector. How can data and evidence from these sources be able to support decision makers in aligning to agriculture investments with this agreement?
Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, I think any forward-looking type of analysis is critical to planning in the policy space, right? And I think there I would emphasize the role of partnerships, the strength of partnerships, maybe drawing on our experience. We've worked with OECD FAO for many years now at BFAP, firstly providing inputs into their process, into the global outlook, and then once they've harnessed that from all the relevant partner countries, we then draw the global impact of that back to the South African system, where our model is then more disaggregated, maybe a little bit more unique to the country in terms of its commodity coverage and priority mix. We then use that to do once a year what we call a baseline outlook. So we put a base of information very similar to what they do at a global level, but for South Africa specifically. So it puts a base of information out there for the industry, for everybody to use, right, which puts the core challenges, the core priorities, everything on the table, and provides sort of a common base of knowledge of what's going on in the sector. It also then puts us in a good place, having that system maintained, to respond quickly to policy requests, which sometimes are quick in responding to crises, but also to use it for more strategic policy work. So if I can use an example of our latest initiative, which was the Agriculture Agro-Processing Master Plan, which Dirk spoke about yesterday as well. There, as an institute, we used that system. We provided a core of background information and research. And then it was a very collaborative process with everyone, stakeholders in the value chain, private sector, through the industry associations, government, labor, civil society, which all contributed from this common base of knowledge to come up and to co-create this plan, which then also makes everyone responsible for its implementation. And I think that's a very successful sort of framework where you draw on the analytics, you draw on the evidence, you draw on the research, and then collaborate to make sure everybody's priorities are covered.
Brilliant. And then back to AGRA. I have AGRA, another question for you. How is AGRA partnering with local agribusiness firms and with the AFCFTA Secretariat to ensure that the continent realizes its goal of tripling the intra-regional trade in Africa?
Thank you. So AGRA is really closely working with private sector, as I said, because we understand the private sector provides the demand pool that's needed to transform smallholder agriculture from a subsistence to a commercialized production. And trade is also an extension of the domestic market. We see it as a continuum of the domestic market, where the market happens to be on the other side of the border, except that it brings new challenges and also different interventions. So the other thing we've been doing is also mentioned by one of the participants, developing regional value chains that cut across different countries. An example is ECOWAS Rice Observatory. We've been working with the ECOWAS region to increase rice production in the region, because the member states of ECOWAS have already made a political decision to be self-sufficient in rice production. Whether that's attainable or not, it's another matter, but we've been supporting those countries boost rice production. In the Eastern and Southern Africa region, we are working on horticulture value chain development across many countries. With AFCFTA, we have very close collaboration. We have provided TA for the organization to ramp up their capacity. We hired and seconded about 3 consultants to the secretariat. The champion for the new regional food trade strategy is Rwandan Minister of Trade and Industry. So we are also supporting the minister champion this regional food trade issues. And as I said, we are currently finalizing a food trade strategy, agri-food strategy, which we hope FCFTA will be implemented and showing early results in boosting an original trade in their continent. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks for that, what AGRA is doing, trying to collaborate and bring together all these business partners and private partners. On this note, members, I think the other panelists had really given very good summaries. And I don't want to go back there, but rather, just in case the audience has one burning question. And if there's no burning question, I was told to stop on time. I would like to invite Professor Gideon Obare to give us some key takeaways and the next steps. Professor, you're most welcome.
Yeah, sure.
4 minutes.
So thank you very much, moderator and panelists. The discussion was quite exciting, and this is the kind of information that I managed to tease out from all the interaction. First of all, starting from your very nice, broad kind of like introduction to the subject matter. And then there was the presentation from the representative of FAO. Now, here then, in summary, here are my takeaways from the whole exercise. One is the transformative potential of the African free trade area. So it is transformative because of its potential to improve the trade across borders, and then two, balancing food self-sufficiency and regional trade. At least that is, I managed to get that, and that is based on the national food focus and self-sufficiency, which sometimes tend to conflict with regional trade. And then the other thing was like utilizing data that is already available from the FAO database that can, for ANAPRI and related, they can just like complement or use the data that is available so that they can be able to conduct analyses that will be that will just inform policy decision making process. Potential areas of collaboration, again from the FAO presentation, include areas for evaluating alternative policies, productivity analysis, assessment of impact, simulation of market shocks and country potential. From the panelists, this is what I managed to gather. The interconnectedness of markets do vary across regions. We need to consider the trade dynamics. There are challenges with regard to access to finance, border issues including corruption. Those then constitute a list of hurdles that really kind of like constrain interregional or intercountry trade. Infrastructure deficit also came out quite significantly. adoption of technology, internet, that if we were to kind of like adopt those kind of technologies that will enhance communication between private and public sectors, in terms of collaborating with the other partners, ANAPRI, AGRA, FANPRAM, I mean, make agriculture attractive to stakeholders, particularly for all. Improve knowledge management across the board. The assumption that we know it all, the silo mentality, I think, came across quite well. We need to relax that assumption, particularly that came from AGRA. So what are the actionable recommendations, maybe just in brief? Utilize data, as I've said, from the FAO Outlook to provide evidence-based policy recommendation. Conduct research on the free trade agreement on impact with regard to agriculture to guide strategic position, decisions rather. Facilitate smallholder engagement, and capacity building came up as well, quite prominently. For development partners, I think something that I managed to capture is that there are infrastructure deficits, roads and related. Maybe investing in those infrastructures will have a significant positive impact, enhance data utilization, and for governments, I think what I managed to get was simplify customs procedures and reduce tariffs and non-tariff barriers. Quality seeds and mechanization need to be encouraged and enhanced. Adopt labor-saving technologies by way or through mechanization. The absence of value chains without multiplier effects. So again, the political economy vis-a-vis the economics. So apparently what came out is that politically, the political space, so the policymakers might want to encourage the adoption of those value chains that have limited multiplier effects. So what we need to do, the intervention is kind of like with this analysis and so on, that can provide information that will then assist in the policymakers adopting those value chains with the broad multiplier effect. Engage in policy dialogue, collaborate with governments to advocate for supportive policies. I think I got that. And then with regard to next steps, give me 4 minutes. They are over? They are over? Okay, so in that case then, based on what I've said, I think you can be able to make inferences on what the next steps should be. So, thank you very much, and I wish to thank all the panelists and collaborators.
Thank you very much for distilling all that information from our panelists and from their presentation. My dear panelists, I think you've done an excellent job. Okay, thank you very much. I need your permission to now share. Some questions just came through online. 3 questions.
Okay, so hello. We have a question from Mr. Badakar, who is an economic actor in the African Civil Society for Development in West Africa. And his question to the panelists is, before adapting the emerging markets economics in ECOWAS is studies for institutional difficulties, or I think what he wants to say is, are there studies for institutional difficulties for economic actors in West Africa? And then another question from Augustine Kigozi. He says, thank you for the excellent presentation. However, do you think advocating for fertilizer usage is the best approach? Many farmers lack the knowledge to use them effectively. I propose that we shift our focus toward promoting nature-based solutions instead. And then Osmani from Sodes Sal says they have been helping smallhold farmers have access to affordable fertilizer and chemicals. Thank you.
Very much our members online for those very interesting questions. I think the questions are directed to the think tanks, if I'm not mistaken. So let's spend just 2 minutes answering. Just pick on any of the 3 questions you can answer and run away with it. Thank you.
There was one question on ECOWAS. So I mentioned ECOWAS in the context of rice development. So basically in that rice development, we have done a comprehensive analysis of the rice value chain in the region, country by country. What are the policy, regulatory, institutional issues, as well as capacity deficiencies. So it's really a comprehensive plan. So the individual that question was asked whether there was institutional development intervention. My short answer is yes.
Thank you. And any other think tank to address the other 2 questions in 1 minute?
Yeah, I can speak to the. Yeah, you want to go?
Okay. Okay, our presenter wants to address one of the questions. The microphone.
Okay.
As they take the microphone, you can go ahead and spend 1 minute.
Okay. Okay. On the issue of use of inorganic fertilizer vis-a-vis nature-based solution, I suppose the question is focusing on agroecology, regenerative agriculture approaches. And I think this, in my view, should be considered as complementary and not competing.
Yes.
To the extent that even as we use organic fertilizers, we know that they will improve soil conditions in the longer term, but will also facilitate better uptake of mineral fertilizers, and therefore they all lead to improved productivity. One of the challenges around some of the nature-based solutions is that it is emerging, and even if you are talking about organic fertilizers like bokashi and others, they have not reached a stage where we have marketable products. Some of them are fairly bulky, and we have not reached that stage where we have marketable products with standards which can be able to immediately replace products which are in the market in the area of inorganic. So even as this is developed, I think we should look at complementary use to increase productivity in the short term.
Thank you very much for that wonderful answer. Mr. Ali, can you just in 1 minute?
Yeah, I want to add to what the panelists said. We're not, and answer the second question. I mean, the experts that I talked to that came up with these recommendations, they were not advocating for blanket, increase of synthetic fertilizers, right? It was fertilizers together with farm management practices, soil amendments, mechanization, using better seeds, a bunch of things together. It wasn't a blanket increase, and I think we're not at the point right now in sub-Saharan Africa where we're saying, fertilizer is a problem, right? Because it's not like in Europe or in other countries where it's a big problem. It's not, because we are using much of it. And for manure and other, organic ones, I think the collection, processing, applying, it's even a problem in the U.S., let alone in Africa. So there's a long way to go in that direction.
Very much, dear panelists. Thank you very much, Mr. Ali, and thank you very much, audience, for your very, very good presentation and answering of questions and everything. Thank you. Over to you, Tinashe.
Thank you, distinguished speakers, for shedding the light on a critical link between agriculture, trade, and AFCTA's transformative power and potential in Africa. Before you leave the stage, we would like to have a group photo. The photographer will be coming any minute to take a picture of all of you. Please rise. Ladies and gentlemen, participants, we will, after that, take a short health break. Please be back at 11 sharp. We will make sure everyone is back at 11 sharp so that we can resume and start the final session of this day. Also, please do not miss out our little adventure at Gorée Island today. An infamous writer, Senegalese writer, Mariama Ba said, "A place does not forget. It speaks and comes alive again with the memories of those who once inhabited it." In Gorée, if you listen attentively, you'll hear the chains. You'll hear the heavy chains, the fears and tears, and most importantly, the hope of Africa. Stories of resilience, humanity, and a shared story of Africa, Senegal, and the world. See you in a bit. Thank you. Please everyone be back at 11 sharp. S'il vous plaît, revenez à 11h pile. We insist that everyone come back at 11 sharp. Please be back at 11 sharp. S'il vous plaît, que tout le monde revienne à 11h pile. S'il vous plaît. Twelve minutes left. We expect everyone to be back at 11 sharp. You have 12 minutes left. Nous aimerions que tout le monde revienne à 11h pile. Il vous reste 11 minutes.